Spectrovision Radio. Spectrovision Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher.
I'm in there and kind of doing my trancy thing that I do. And these two beings that I totally, in my mind, was like, oh, the fairies are here. The closest way I could say is like if deer were humanoid, that was kind of the vibe.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. My name is Jo Hickey Hall and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Aidan Wachter. Welcome, Aidan. It's really fantastic to have you here, and we've been kind of chatting through each other's Patreons. You have an amazing Patreon. I really highly recommend that people go and check it out. You are giving so much, and having read your book now, I realise I'm years behind because I've got a lot of catching up to do. Seriously, it was like both a breath of fresh air, but also just really taking me back to, what is extremely important in the practice that I've learned over, sort of 20 years or so, because it brings the focus back in, and your exercises are second to none, actually, I will have to say. I think there are two books that I would recommend now to people that are starting on a path. And the first is Marion Green's A Witch Alone. That was my first book and it was invaluable. And now your book, actually. So thank you for writing it. And I'd just love to know about how you came kind of into the practice that you have now, because you've gathered all of the the treasures and presented them.
Well, thank you first. That's good company to keep. And they're both green books in their way. So we approve. It's a really long kind of route. And if I go back all the way, I start when I was really little. In that my earliest memories are fever dreams. They're hallucinations from when I was 2 and had pneumonia. And that's the first thing I remember. And then there was just oddities. When I was a kid, I had a lot of visitations from things that I didn't know what they were. But and these were two, I think, spirits now that I experienced as a small child based on toys that I had. So I had the old, I'll be 60 next year, so some of these are way outdated for the younger folks probably, but we had cowboy and Indian sets of plastic toys and army soldier sets and things like that. And so one of them was this army soldier and one of them was a Native American. And they would be in my space sometimes. But if I tried to look at them straight on, they would turn sideways and they were two-dimensional. So when they got edged to me, they were gone. And that was the weirdest thing to try and parse when I was 6 or 8. I kind of figured out the two-dimensional thing, like, oh, they're like super thin, like really thin pieces of paper or something. And I had things like that go on, and a lot of night terrors, a lot of sleep paralysis, kind of continuous nightmares. Um, and then when I was 11, uh, I was in a dream where I was in a bookstore that I used to go to buy science fiction and fantasy. And I was sitting on the floor with a stack of books trying to figure out what I could buy with my limited funds, as I often did. And this sense of cold appeared in the space. And I looked up, and it was this man in an entirely black suit, black shirt, black hair, solid black eyes, no whites, no pupils, dark beard. And he was just like radiating this cold wall of power at me. And it was the most intense thing I'd ever experienced, kind of waking or asleep. And it was enough that it woke me up. But I never forgot about it at all. It's still one of my clearest memories. But I didn't know what it was. But functionally, all sorts of stuff began to change in my life at that point. And so now, kind of, we both know Dara Mason Field, who's got a great book on the Man in Black. And eventually, as I got into looking at magic and witchcraft and looking at older material, because the kind of what we now think of as traditional witchcraft wasn't really a thing at this point in time. This would have been earliest 80s. And when I came upon these kind of witch trial documents and discussions of the Man in Black in folklore, I was like, oh, wait a second, I know that guy. That guy's shown up. And so for me, that was kind of the primary initiation that sent me down the path. And within maybe a year, I was looking at the few books on witchcraft and magic that I could find at that time. And that just kind of stayed in the background until 82, when I contacted the Temple of Psychick Youth in England, and got their Grey Book, which was their instruction manual for a form of sigil magic. And I didn't kind of align myself with the temple at that time. I did that 5 years later. I joined the temple, I think, 5 years later. But I began using that methodology because it made sense. It was really simple. And the folks that I met that turned me on to psychic TV, which is how I got the book, one of them was a ceremonial magician. And maybe a year later, 2 years later, I ended up working in a bookstore with a woman who was a witch. She was the first witch that I knew. And so kind of knowing those two folks kind of opened a lot of channels just for me to kind of dig in deeper. And as well, kind of those, I think, kind of whatever had been kind of hassling my whole life, kind of the night terror stuff. As I got not in any way skilled at magic because I was way too new, but I kind of knew what was what at least. I had multiple possession experiences, and kind of some of them were neutral, some of them were really unpleasant, some of them were like hostile takeovers. And in that, I kind of went, oh, this shit that I'm learning doesn't address this, but I think I can work it out. And so I began kind of going, okay, if the LBRP doesn't get this thing out of my body, what do you do? And just became very intuitive in my approaches. And pretty soon it was kind of interesting because I realized that at that time, nobody that I knew, whether they were like long-term Thelemites or long-term witches, that when you got to that stuff, none of them really knew what to do with it.
Right.
And so they weren't very helpful. But a few of them were like really clear, like, you have to figure out how to do this. Like, this is an initiation, and you have to figure out if you are going to seed power to this thing. And it's a test. Not saying that it's an intentional thing, just like this is what you got, right? It's not like this is the way the universe is working to bring you somewhere, but more like this is a test because you're in it and it's up to you to sort it and just do it. And I figured out how, and that led to other things, doing exorcisms for other people, things most people I knew would not touch. Yeah, and that's, a lot of the stuff that's in Six Ways is the stuff that I found at that time or through those first kind of 10 years that I still continued to share with people when they would ask, like, what do I do? It's like, these are the things I keep recommending. So let's put a book out that
Yeah.
kind of discusses them.
And you learn what works effectively. You go through it and you learn what really works. And once you found that, it's something that you'll always go back to, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this is also very much like the main body of what I learned was pre-internet and the very earliest days. What I say is my friend Marek and I, who's passed, we used to bitch about the fact that pictures had arrived on the internet and this was clearly going to be the end of everything, which was right. But so this is when I'm talking about early internet, you couldn't share a photo on the internet. Everything was just typing. And that was really good because there wasn't enough information to get bogged down. Like maybe if I was in London and there were good bookstores there, but I wasn't. I was out in the suburban woods of California, so there was very little available. So you really worked it and you figured out what is useful in this particular book and hammer it. So.
Yeah. Could you describe, you know, what, what kind of methods you would use when somebody approached you with a situation of possession?
What happened for me is probably the best place to start there. This thing got into me. Yeah, we'll go to the kind of stuff we talked about earlier later, but this is later than my first experiences, but by a couple of years. And something got into me, and I wasn't sure initially if maybe I'd had like some kind of a psychological break, but
Yeah.
like I could tell like all of a sudden, like my mind was going places it didn't go, and they weren't places I was interested in it going. And kind of in part because I'd had that experience on psychedelics before, but I wasn't using at that time. Um, I began kind of interrogating that thing and going like, I'm not buying that you are me.
Mm.
So let's dig in here because I'm not doing any of the things you want me to do. And it eventually got really aggressive. Um, and I was kind of meditating with it, maybe 2 days into it or 3 days into it. And I got it to kind of say what it was doing. And it's like, I want you out of here.
Mm.
And I want this body. Um, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not happening. It just got progressively more aggressive. And so this was producing manifestations around me. That I had roommates and I was living with my girlfriend at the time, so they could experience it both as kind of like radical personality changes in me, but also kind of phenomena in this space. Um, I didn't see most of that stuff, but I'm kind of psychic as a brick. So, but they were like, yeah, there's stuff we can see it around you, and we can see it moving in and out of you. And so I kind of like went head on with it for several days, and that was not working. Um, and I remembered this particular experience with the psychedelic that was a neurotoxin, um, where I really totally lost the ability to speak. I couldn't really form coherent thoughts, but I kind of knew that that wasn't permanent. in that moment. I was like, okay, I can reassemble this, right? Because this is how we learn, right? We start with nothing and we build up, a personality and all of these things. And so I had done that after that experience. It took me about a week to get kind of verbal again. Um, and I remembered that, and I now think that was my allies kind of pointing me back to that. And I remember I asked all of my roommates, it's like, can you guys let me have the house for like the next 8 hours? And so they all left. And I went into the temple and actually did like a really kind of way more formal than I was even doing at that time, kind of ritual magic opening and kind of closed me and the thing in it. And I don't even know, except I think it was the allies, or perhaps what I now call kind of mistline allies, which are kind of spiritually connected dead, not ancestral dead specifically,
Yeah.
kind of guided me through that process
Mm.
because I didn't know what I was going to do. And I walked into the room, did all the stuff to get it going, could feel the thing really solidly more tangible in the presence. And it was kind of expecting the fight. I think I was expecting the fight. And instead, I remember I sat down on the floor and said, "You want this? Come and get it. Like we're doing this inside of me. Um, and I will fuck you up."
Mm.
And it was like, oh, not interested. Like it wanted me to exit first so it could take over, and it wanted to see if it could kind of get me to capitulate. And when I was like, no, 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 you got to come all the way in if you want to do this, we're going to do this on home ground. Um, and so after that, I was pretty chill about everything. Like, okay, it doesn't probably get that much worse than that. That was like, a really hellish week for me and everybody around me.
Yeah.
And so when it would come up for other spaces, um, and I mostly just did spaces. It was things that were in places that were messing with people.
Mhm.
Um, I would kind of walk in with that attitude, like, okay, you're super intense. I'm really nuts, and I'm not concerned about the things most people would be concerned about here. I don't care where you came from. I don't care if you're evil. I don't care if you are scary. You don't get to do this in this house. And so let's go. Um, and some of those were multi-day processes too. I'm sure there are better ways, but it was like nobody else was willing to kind of go in there. So it was like, sure, I'll go see. Because to me, it was fascinating. It's like I'd already learned by that time that these things were real, that, some of the stuff that we experience in this form are certainly kind of psychological subroutines or things like that, but some of them are not. And I was really fascinated by them. Like, of course, I would go in there. Like, what have I been doing for the last 8 years or whatever at that point, if not to be useful here, So let's go in and chase this thing down and get it to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for describing that. Did you have kind of like a mentor then? I mean, the people that you that were surrounding
I
you.
wish.
Oh, this is it. It sounds like they said you need to go and do this. So, I mean, yeah, that is a kind of baptism of baptism of fire, if you pardon the phrase.
Yeah. Maybe 5 years ago, I realized that the person that I would put in that category, it's actually kind of a weird one to put in that because of what our relationship was. But there's a beautiful shop. It's still there in San Francisco that I think it showed up when I was like 20 or 21, called the Sword and Rose. It was run by this gentleman, Randy David, and his partner, Patrick. And I found it pretty quickly after it opened and just kind of bonded with Randy. And over the course of many years, I would tend to like pick the rainiest winter day that I had off and go in and see if he was solo in there because people weren't out shopping. And we spent dozens of hours over many, many days, over a lot of years, just sitting and talking. And what I got from Randy was not training, but I got to sit with somebody who also had their own experience of all this stuff that didn't really match what was in the books. Um, who was like, yeah, what you're experiencing is valid and is real, and you seem like you're making your way, and that's really good. And so he's kind of he passed quite a while ago now, but he's kind of the biggest of what, kind of in some forms of witchcraft, we might call the mighty dead. Um, that I think he was the one that kind of kept me together through a lot of that, even though what we did was on the surface very light. It was, us hanging out and drinking coffee by the fire in his shop a lot, and not talking tech, just talking, and sometimes talking stories and talking experiences. But um, so he's probably the biggest influence on me in many ways.
You know, talking about things that aren't in books, I think that's really important because I think a lot of people set out and they feel that they have to follow something, that is set out in books. And I think what I really got from reading Six Ways as well was your sense of, just no dogma. I mean, this is what I was taught too, and it's just really refreshing, I think, if you find, a book like yours, that does just encourage you to kind of trust in to what your own experience is, no matter what somebody else tells you it is. I think it feels like, yeah, there are a lot of people out there who would say, no, you have to do it like this. And I think that in the way that you have described your journey has been, this is where you get to learn. You've got to get out. You've got to learn to trust your own intuition. You've got to go and do it, and also what some people might see as, they might frame something in a particular way, um, that is just kind of limited by their own perspectives anyway. It's just limited by their own experiences and beliefs and what have you. I think it's really important, especially on these paths, that you do forge it yourself. And I'm just wondering with that initial experience with the dark man or the man in black, what was the sense of that? Did you have a sense that you knew him in any way, or kind of what did it leave you with? I mean, obviously it
It
left.
left me with like, wow, that was really terrifying. And pretty much that, except that I knew it was important. Um, I always knew it was important. And I think, like, it's hard to remember, but I really did change radically after that. And I think within a year or two, I realized that, like, okay, I don't know that it was that, but around that time, I really changed. And so I do feel, but at the time, it was just kind of overwhelming. And it was also one of the things, it was like a really useful kind of first lesson that, like, overwhelm might feel really scary, but that's just one interpretation of it. Like, I didn't get any sense of malevolence from him. Like, he was really cold. Um, but I know people who've had experiences, with that figure, and it's been really sketchy to them. And I didn't have that. It was just like way too much. Like the degree of presence that came in that experience was way more than I had ever had. I didn't have anything to base it on or connect it to. Um, and so that was good because it's like I do think that kind of set me up for the later stuff that was pretty sketchy because I just didn't have the same response I think I would have had if I hadn't had that experience and really had a long time before the other stuff really kicked up. where something would go off and I would either be like, wow, that's really intense, or you're really intense. What's going on with you? Whatever had shown up. Um, or if it was more overtly malignant, just being like, no, not happening. Let's go. It's like if you want to bang, we can bang. Which is not how I am physically at all. But in that zone, some part of me, whether that's, like I said, I think a lot of it is kind of spiritual memory. Like I think I walked into this looking for keys to something that I knew was there, but that I had forgotten or had lost somewhere. Um, which also made it pretty easy to sort material. Like there was a lot of stuff that would come through, and I just was like, not for me. And it's kind of interesting to me now that I made judgment calls when I was 15 or 16 on books and things, that when I go back to look at them, I'm like, yeah, I think this person's wrong. Like just straight up, like almost 50 years later, I'm like, yeah, me at 15 somehow saw that and was like, that's not what I do. Not necessarily wrong for their experience, but this is not what I do. And I think that what you were kind of speaking to, I was just writing on it for the course that I'm starting on the solstice, um, because it's one of the things I've had to work through in the Discord space around the Patreon, is to get people to shut the fuck up about interpreting each other's experiences, um, and to learn not to ask and learn not to default to that, because that's kind of what the internet has really provided, is like infinite interpretation. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's happening to you, or happening through you, or happening with your allies. And people are so keen to say, oh, this is this spirit. Oh, this is this spirit. Or even when you have the experience of a spirit showing up, they're like, oh, that means you need to be working with them. And I'm like, I have told almost every spirit that has ever shown up to fuck off. Like politely, but like, no, I don't do what you're into. I have people I'm working with and I'm good. Thanks. Would you like, a cup of tea and then get on your way? Um, and I think that that kind of discernment and discretion has been really impacted by just the overabundance of interpretation. Uh, and so I really like people to at least take a couple of weeks at the minimum and like sit with it. Don't try and go hunting for information. Don't go online. Don't go try and search out what this means. Sit with it. See if something changed in your life. Because I think we learn, that's how we develop intuition. It's not a specific practice in a book that is like, this is how you learn this. We learn it by experiencing things, having feelings, having maybe there are things that are signs for you, and those signs might be totally different for other people. And you shouldn't listen to those people until you have an idea of what's up, or you realize it's a problem. And then you need to also have that discretion to be able to go, okay, who could I ask?
Mm-hmm.
Who is that? Because it's like I'll go there with people, but I make them work for it. It's like, okay, we're going to have a long talk before I get to the point where I tell you if I have an opinion about what I think went down. Because why would I? It's not me. You're not me.
Yeah.
Very few of the things that I've experienced on the spiritual that I brought to other people for help interpreting do I think that helped. And in general, I think it got in the way.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I guess, when these things happen, they're coming, they're coming from the non-material, they're coming it within us. And then if we kind of take them out and place too much logic or rationality on them, we're actually often losing, the key elements of how they rise within us, which is what you were just saying. But I think it's the kind of the taking out and looking and inspecting and comparing, and this is where I think I see this with the kind of categorization of fairies as well. It's not, it doesn't work with those worlds. We have to kind of meet them on their own terms. It's going to be vague. However vague it is, when something, you know, introduces itself, it and you know them. But then to kind of be certain about, oh, well, this was definitely this and this is what it means. Yeah, I agree. It's going in the opposite direction, really, to what.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think that that's not true historically. I think that when we lived in small groups and clans and things like that, we were really generating kind of group experience of all of this stuff and experiencing group experience of all of this stuff. And there was a whole process there of educating people from a very early age on what the group had learned these things meant. But these were incredibly tight-knit, land-based, locale-based things, you know? Um, and so kind of I think people are probably having that pull to that, but I don't know that it works in the modern world, at least not in a very widespread way. Um, I think that where I live now, if we were to get all of the kind of animist practitioners together and dump us onto a couple blocks of the town, 10 years on, we would probably have shared lore that was pretty accurate. Um, but I don't think that that's going to happen between me and you where you're living and someone in Florida or someone in, the Ukraine. I did the Ukraine thing that my U.S. education makes me do in Ukraine. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. Um, and I also definitely agree with what you said as part of that is unless you're willing to kind of like have those experiences, have the ones that I think are kind of internally generated and just be with them, you may not really be in a place to deal with the other when you really connect to it. Because those conversations, at least for me, are either very fast and very kind of vague.
Yeah.
Like it was important, that
Yeah.
it's very counter logic and it's counter kind of all of the safety nets I see people trying to put around this stuff.
Mm.
Because like I've had things show up in ritual space or in trance space, which is where most of the stuff for me happens. Um, and within one meeting, we have made agreements and we're on the same page. Because I can just tell, like I can absolutely tell, like, yeah, this is good. There's no question. It's not, to me, my friend Fabiku, kind of in a somewhat different context, but he's also a really serious practitioner. So I think it comes from there. He said, everything that isn't a hell yes is a hell no.
Mm.
And don't try and convince yourself that all the other stuff is a hell yes. Like it's either really solid, like, yes, we're doing this thing, or you say no, you know? And I think that that's very true in this kind of stuff. But you also have to have given yourself the space to develop the intuition enough that you're like, yeah, you trust that. You've seen uh, what's legit.
In the full-length episode, Aidan describes being approached by spirit to make a doorway in another religious community. He explains his relationship with neanderthal spirit allies that underline a lot of his work these days, and how they direct him to certain experiences and people. Aidan also shares an example of spirit attachment removal and what happened when the dark man returned to him. For the full-length version, join us and support on Patreon. You were in New Mexico and you wrote 6 Ways, right?
Yeah. But I did have a lot of my biggest early experiences were in Shasta.
Right.
The woman that I met when as I mentioned earlier, when I started at the bookstore and I met a witch, her mother lived in Shasta and she had grown up there, I think. And she had moved back from working in the bookstore, but we'd become good friends in that time. And so I started visiting her up there, alone sometimes, sometimes with whatever girlfriend I had at the time. And so a lot of the experiences that I had, that are some of which are in Six Ways, happened there. And those were very formative because those were kind of I guess the first ones kicked in when I was 18, and maybe the last of those happened by the time I was 23. There was that chunk of time where I was up there fairly regularly and experienced quite a lot of pretty nutty stuff that was like, okay, this is it all was very helpful, but again, it didn't mean anything in particular, but it was totally necessary. You know.
Are these the fairy experiences that
I
you?
did have multiple fairy experiences up there. Um, so the first one, and it's, I guess two of them are back to back basically. And one is a fairy experience, and one is dealing with the dead. My girlfriend and I and our dog headed up to go. We just quit our jobs to go roam around in her VW bus, and we rolled into this campsite that I think we'd stayed in once before, but because of it was early in the year, and this is high elevation in the mountains. Only one of the campsites had a clear line of the sun, and so it had thawed out, so you could pull your vehicle in there, and nobody else could get in there. So we rolled in and took that. So we had this campsite to ourselves for weeks. It was fantastic, right off this little lake. And so we were just, hanging out and playing with the dog and everything. And there's these crags up above the lake, big stone crags way up there, and lots of brush on the kind of cliff face or hill face that leads up to them. And so I remember that I had like the runes that I'd made and a couple of tools because I'd been practicing for quite a while at that point, a few years. And I packed those into a bag and brought a lunch and some water and told my girlfriend, like, I'm going to go have lunch up there. And she very smartly was like, I am not going to go up there with you because I believe there's no path up there. And there wasn't. And so I started just kind of picking my way up this hillside covered in sagebrush, which is very stiff and stabby. It's not straight out thorns, but it doesn't need them essentially. It's kind of very dry, rocky, scrubby bush. And there was no path up to this thing, so I'm just kind of climbing the sagebrush up the hill, and I must have been at it for like 90 minutes, and super scratched up and probably bleeding at this point, but I'm really stubborn. And I remember I got more than halfway up and it was just unrelenting. And I stopped and I was like, hey, if you don't want me up there, I get it. But this is ridiculous. And so if you are open to me visiting you, um, you could ease up a
Yeah.
bit, talk into the whole environment. And I pulled myself up maybe another 10 feet and hit a deer path.
Ah.
Like I was just below this deer path. And so I got on the deer path, and then I could just kind of walk up. And so that face that I am climbing is the southern face. And so it's all clear of snow and it's very hot up there. And then as I crest that ridge, that's the last kind of bit to get up on the crags, it's the northern side of this mountain, and it's all snow.
Wow.
So it's like hot, 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 probably 85 degrees in the sun on one side. And then you get to the top and it's this endless snowfield down to the forest. And I see that there is a small cabin down the hill, way down the hillside, with smoke coming out of the chimney, tiny little thing, not modern at all. And I get this like overwhelming, just like feeling of total joy. And I'm going there. And I start running down the hill, and I don't hear voices too much. But I very clearly heard a voice in my head that said, if you go there, you don't get to come back. And I stopped. And it was like this heartbreaking experience because I was like, I didn't not want to come back, but it's like I wanted to be there so bad. Um, and so I turned around and kind of walked away from that and walked up to climbed up to the crags and got back in the sun side of it and kind of sat with that for a long time and eventually had my lunch and went back down. I get back down to the van and I'm pretty shaken by this thing, this whole experience. And I get in the van and I was sitting in the maybe on a trunk or something. I can't remember how that van was really laid out, but I know that my girlfriend was on the bench seat at the back and we were facing each other. And she was like, what happened up there? And I don't remember if I even told her at that point because I remember that I got really quiet and then I started talking to her, but I couldn't hear what I was saying. And over the course of the next couple of minutes, I realized that I had been moved into the back seat of my own kind of consciousness, and that there was somebody else that was kind of overlaid on me. And that person was talking to them, or was talking to her. And I could tell that he didn't like her, but he wasn't like a risk. And she was open to whatever was happening. And so he talked to her for about a half an hour, I think. And then I kind of like came in and I was like, that was really weird. She was like, that was really weird. And she could see him overlaid on me as well. And her experience was that he was uh, older, both in age. We were both in our 20s, but also maybe several hundred years back, older native man. Uh, and he was talking to her about what her people had done in that zone, or addressing what had happened there to his people through her people. And I didn't know how specific. We didn't know how specific that was or anything. Is that her, or is that just because we're whites, or what? And it was really odd. And then I was just kind of the usual for experiences like that, pretty exhausted all day. Um, and the next day, my friend's mom, who lived there, who is my friend is half Native American, half white. And her mom is the full Native side. And she came up to see us and kind of walked up to where we were camped and was like, you come and take a walk with me. And so I got up and we walked out into the woods. And I don't remember most of the conversation. I remember at one point she's pointed out a plant. She's like, that's a really good plant for dealing with poison oak or poison ivy. And I was like, yeah, I don't get that. And she's like, yeah, most of us don't. And I was like, still pretty blown out. So I was not really tracking. Uh, And then we walked around for a while and we got to where uh, we could see the crags. And she points up there and she's like, it's really weird up there. And I'm like, yeah, it's really weird up there. And she's like, did you hear the ravens or the crows? I can't remember which. Maybe crows, but it's probably in the book. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, did you see them? And I was like, I never saw them. And she's like, yeah, they aren't really there.
Mm.
She's like, but they will drive you off the mountain if they don't want you there. Um, and she goes in, uh, they don't like white folks. And I was like, I don't get that because I am entirely white folks, you know. And she was like, kind of. And I don't think she necessarily even had words, but she's like, there's something else on you that isn't that as well. Um, is how I interpret that now. I wasn't sharp enough then to kind of follow up with her,
Mhm.
but that was kind of a really weird thing that I was never comfortable to have like kind of sitting with me, like, what was that? That's a really strange thing to say. But as I kind of got way further along the path, I was like, oh, maybe that's all these old folks that she's talking about. Like that the spirits around me are like not what most people that she considered the white folks had, you know?
Mm.
And so she was kind of like, yeah, I could see them getting up there. And and then I told her about the kind of light possession experience that I had. And she's like, yeah, there was like a lot of kind of typically nasty killing done up here by whites. And I said, yeah, the guy really didn't kind of like my partner. And she was kind of non-committal, but was kind of like, yeah, I get that, you know, in the sense that my sense was that she didn't, I don't think she liked any of my girlfriends. So I think that that was not just her. I think that that was like, yeah, you have bad taste in women or something, according to her. But, and that woman's awesome. We're still close. But, yeah, so that was the first kind of event that happened up there. And then a couple of years later, I went up there. Um, this was in '89, I think. And I went up there by myself this time. And at one point, I hiked, I think I was in the same zone, but I didn't go up the face of the crags, but I was kind of in that same area. And I hiked up onto the top of this rise. And so it's probably like 7,000 or 8,000 feet up there. So this is all high elevation, you know. I think Shasta's gets up to like 14 or something, 13 or 14. Um, and it was all rock up on the top and just really beautiful kind of deserty looking, kind of lunar looking landscape, you know, not much plants up there, kind of pretty scraped clean by the snows and the wind and everything. But there were these eroded um, pools where just water had eroded these big pools up there. And so they were maybe like, you know, some of the small ones were just like, you know, 6 inches or a foot, but there were some big ones that were maybe like, you know, 6 or 8 feet across. And I don't know if it was snow melt or if it was rain had happened up there before I got there, but a bunch of those were pretty full. And I was like, oh, I'm totally getting in one of these because it's, the sun's been baking the rocks. And it's like the water is super warm. I'm like, I'm totally gonna hot tub on this in this rock. And they were pretty shallow, but it was enough to cover most of my body. And then, that nice kind of dish. So you were just super chill, crashed out in there. And so I'm in there and kind of doing my trancy thing that I do. And it's just really lovely, kind of baking in the sun in this warm water. And I don't know if I fell asleep or if kind of I just went liminal or just everything shifted, but um, so I'm naked in this pool, and these two beings that I totally in my mind was like, oh, the fairies are here. Um, and they were slender and normal person size. And it was a boy. It was what seemed to be a boy and a girl, and really beautiful. 20 somethings, very slight but very strong. Um, and like the thing that struck me, and if I think back to that I still have, is it's like the closest way I could say is like if deer were humanoid, that was kind of the vibe. Like very, very light bones, but very strong, very vibrant. Um, like impossible to tell whether the skin was dark or light because they were so kind of radiant. Um, really big eyes. Um, I don't remember what kind of ears they had. I know that to me, it was just instantly clear. Like these are like the fairies have shown up. Like I knew that. Um, and yeah, and I don't remember whether we ever talked at all. Um, yeah, it was super beautiful, but had kind of what we think of as kind of the elongated eyes and stuff. But it was more vibe than anything else. And they kind of walked up to the pond and were checking me out for a while. And I was just like, this is really strange. Like, because I knew that they were not human. And I don't remember if we talked at all. Um, but eventually they kind of dropped what they were wearing and got in this thing with me. And we ended up having like this threesome in this pond. And I'm like, this is totally normal. It's really bizarre. And these are really beautiful people. And just really lovely. Like this was not, porny sex. This was like very beautiful. And it went on for a long time. And it was very transcendental experience. Like it was a transcendent experience. It was one of the more amazing things I've ever experienced. And I eventually did fall asleep for sure. And then when I woke up, they were gone. And I was like, wow, that was like the best dream I've ever had. And I sat up, and it had been a long time because I could tell I'd gotten burned. And I sat up, and I still smoked back then. I rolled my own cigarettes. And so I went to my bag that I'd carried up there, and my cigarettes were gone, my matches were gone, and my sunglasses were gone. And I'm like, they totally like took what they wanted in multiple ways. And I thought it was the funniest thing because it was like the only thing that could have possibly made me go, that was not a dream, was they actually did enough physical stuff for me to go like, okay, what the fuck just actually happened? That's my fairy encounter.
You were had.
I was totally had by fairy grifters that wanted my smokes and my shades.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Aidan. Yeah, that's what a beautiful place to be as well. I mean, maybe it was a fairy pool.
Fairy pool, yeah, I like was in their hot tub and they were like,
Yeah.
okay, you want to go then,
There's
human?
there's a fee. Fee for the tub.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Uh,
Amazing. Wow, yeah, that does sound like, I mean, everything I hear about that place is just out of this world.
I was really pleased that you had Rod from Lodge Tales on because Lodge Tales to me is almost the most useful podcast I've ever found
Yeah.
because it's people who haven't drifted so far away from all this stuff.
Mm.
Just talking about their experiences within a culture where not everybody is still on board, but everybody kind of still accepts that this stuff is real. But again, they're not always throwing interpretation on it.
Mm.
They're just like, this is stuff that happens. And some of it, it's stuff you have to deal with and work through or whatever. Um, and so I really loved your chat there. But
Mm.
big shout out to Lodge Tales for being a
Huge.
phenomenal resource that I hope everybody goes and checks out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's like nothing else really that we have. As you say, Rod is talking to people just about their lives, and this is just part of their lives, and that's kind of what we're relearning. So yeah, absolutely invaluable, as you say.
And I think the thing that it was so helpful for me finding that is it actually clarified that to me that that's kind of what I'm interested in is like, what's the long-term project
Mm.
for those of us that are aware that this aspect of kind of the reality even exists and that it always has. Um, and rather than trying to slot into indigenous practice or something, which is hugely problematic, like what would that process for be like for us to kind of all commit to the long game of like how do we kind of continue to share this information and help folks that probably think that they're a little nuts until they run across kind of a pretty big body of people who are talking about it, not from the point of view of this is the book that I want to sell or this is the thing that I do for money, but who are just willing to come out and go, yeah, some really weird stuff has happened. Because then you start to realize that the stuff isn't happening out of context. And it's not to say it's ever been universally common, but it's not all that unusual.
No,
Uh, and
absolutely.
that's, I think, I love what you are doing as well for that, is it really helps people to see, I think, that like, oh yeah, maybe that thing that I never knew what it was just me connecting to the others in some way, you know.
This is it. And yeah, I do notice, lots of people are speaking about this now and how much it's shifted in even even 5 years. It's shifted so much. So something's happening and yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I heard you mention earlier that you're starting your solstice course. Do you want to
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so um, I don't I like doing kind of large group teaching. Like I said, the kind of consulting stuff or one-on-one stuff is difficult for me because I'm not good at um, staying emotionally detached. Like it's kind of I have a strong drive to fix everything for everyone. And so I can't really do that work. You have to be more detached than I am to do that work. But what I've found is that I am able to produce pretty good containers for people to like kind of wade in and have a supportive group space where there's a guidance on what to do, but it's not dogmatic. So, part of what I do with this, the practice is called building a practice, and it's really about the things that I think kind of underlie, kind of effective magical practice that often is lost, um, because it's not quick and because it takes time and it takes that process of like sitting with stuff, through the point like where, okay, I don't know how to do it, so that's keeping me engaged. And now I know how to do it, and maybe I'm feeling some things shift in me a little bit, and so that's fun. And then you hit a point where you go like, wow, this is really fucking boring. And almost everybody stops. And so the container is really designed to keep feeding in new things every couple of weeks for 4 months, with the goal of you learning that, like, okay, you got to go through all of those stages, because on the other side of you being really bored is when you learn what it does. It's not all that stuff up front. All the stuff that happens up front is not what matters. Um, it's when you actually sustain it for long enough that it becomes a bit like doing the dishes a lot of days, that it's like a thing you know you're going to do, but you aren't necessarily in love with it. It's on the other side of that where one day you go, oh, I think I know what this does for me. And that the other part of it is I don't know what that's going to be for the person either. And that's where I think a lot of people over project their own experience on, this is how you're going to know if you're doing it right, because it will start working like this. And I've never found that to be true on a universal level.
Yeah.
And so with my courses, they're definitely about, can I get you into this long enough for a sustained time and give you support for it? And if you have disabilities, or if something that I suggest makes you like wildly anxious, are there workarounds? Are there different approaches to it? Because there usually are. I don't know all of them, but I know a lot of them. Uh, and really just kind of helping people, like, how do you actually build the foundation that kind of what we're talking about is more likely to kind of uh, take root in and grow into whatever it's going to be for you.
That's great. Yeah. So kind of less defined and more, yeah, allowing a space for something to form, but not having to
Yeah.
form it.
And I think also it's tough for folks. In a way, it's related to Six Ways, as a book, in that there's so much stuff people don't know what to focus on.
Mm.
And so having somebody go like, okay, we're going to do this for at least a few weeks.
Mhm.
And this is what you focus on for those few weeks,
Yeah.
is really helpful for the people that will do it. And that's not most people who take the course. I know that. Most people will continue to just information hunt. And that's different. And that's the other part, is the folks that kind of play along begin to go like, oh, okay, it's not about how much I know,
Yeah.
in a data sense. It's like, how much have we learned to sense and realize, hey, that was special. Even if I don't know what it was, something was there, something's talking to me. And that language is not the same for each of us at all. And we have to learn what that is if we want to do this for the long haul. And it's kind of counter to this whole massing of data. Like, the data won't help you. Um,
We're just so
your intuition will fucking help you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
Your contact with your allies, even if it never becomes the kind of conversation you want it to happen, that will help you. Uh, you know, I attribute my kind of survival of the last 5 years entirely on the fact that my allies were there basically waiting for me to say, fucking help me. And
mm,
as soon as I did, they were like, okay, we got you. They didn't do it, but they helped me find my way out of the hole that I was in.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and I think that is universally available, but it's not necessarily going to be, my experience won't be most people's experience. And that doesn't make me special. It's just all of our experiences are going to be very different.
Right.
I'm working on my fourth book right now, and one of the things that I make in there is realizing that, like, to me, all of this stuff that is wrong in the world is due to this like hole that we've been taught to fill with kind of materialist stuff. And the people with the biggest holes are the people who are in power. And so this is why they're constantly trying to amass more, as they think that will make them feel complete. And coming as an animist, what fills that is realizing that we are massively resourced, and we are in a world that is fully infused with all of this stuff, and that it has been the split between us. Kind of, this is how I feel about that idea of fairyland has moved farther away. I believe that that was very intentionally done by the powers that be, kind of globally over time, which I tend to refer to as the generalized term of empire. Because when you're resourced with that knowledge that there are all kinds of kin, whether that's human kin or forest kin or the animal kin or the spirits in the other worlds, we don't care what they want, which is how it should be. And so there's been a very long war against kind of magic and real spirituality, and real spiritual contact, and a lot of fear mongering about it. And I find all of it incredibly suspect. It's like, I don't buy it. And I think that at least my job is to help people connect. And I have no idea what the specifics are going to be, as I've said. But I think that the more of us that get connected, the better our kind of survival rate on the other side of all this stuff is, because there is another side of everything that's going on. And it's interesting because it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of we're in kind of this burning the library at Alexandria moment of, can we destroy as much of the knowledge of options as possible? This is particularly happening in the United States right now.
Yeah.
And so I think as an animist, it's like, no, you get out there and you let people know, like, all this stuff is normal for us. And what we're living in is the construct and is the delusion. And you do have to live in it. But we do need to kind of, again, like you and Lodge Tales and lots of other folks that are doing really good work are, I think, really helping seed people's trust in their experience again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, yeah, I have always known that this is real, even if I can't define it. I think it's hugely important.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Wow, what a great conversation. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
really a lot of help for me to hear what you had to say today. So yeah, and so people can find you on Patreon. That's the best place to find you.
It is. I'm on Blue Sky a little bit, and then I just use the meta platforms when I have a launch or a book or something. I stay out of them the rest of the time. But yeah, there's a website at aidanwachter.com that also just mostly points to the Patreon, because that's pretty much where I've decided to sit. And that's a very active space behind the paywall. It's not super active on the front. There's still a lot of stuff in there. But I think we're clocking on, I don't know, there's probably a week worth of videos in there nonstop at this point. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting stuck in, because I joined and I really loved the look of what you were doing, and I haven't had, because I've been writing, I just haven't had the time to delve in. And now that I've been able to actually spend some time with your work, I'm really excited, like genuinely excited. And if I could kind of recreate in some way what I experienced all those years ago when I was working in Jersey, I will be very happy. So your course sounds great too. So I'm going to check that out. And that starts, is it on solstice or slightly
It
before?
starts on summer solstice and it'll run until Samhain. Um, so
Great.
I basically extended it by just switching from a weekly uh, new materials weekly to every other week because that was way too fast for most people to manage.
Yeah. Great. Good luck with the course, and I might see you there even. Yeah.
I'd love to have you.
Cheers for everything you're doing, and I'll put all of your links up and to your books, and look forward to getting stuck in to your, the books after Six Ways too, because there's a lot of treats in store for me, I think. All right,
Yeah.
cheers then. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joe. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/The Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.